It's not, I mean, it's pretty much self-explanatory. I use pine cones and other natural materials to make wall art. I use big pine cones, I use small pine cones, and I use every part of the pine cone. I'm real picky about the pine cones I use. If the cone has been on the ground for very long, it starts deteriorating. So I pick out, I'm real picky. If there's 100 pine cones out there, I might get 3 or 4 that hasn't been on the ground for very long. And then what I do, I cut it up and trim it the way I want it to. That's how I get the middle, is just to trim around 2 or 3 layers, and it creates that middle. And after I get it trimmed the way I want it, I'll apply a coat of polyurethane. And what that does, it seals the pine cone, from further deterioration. But like I said, I get the best ones to start with, and then you don't have much trouble. When I put the polyurethane on it, that seals it, and then of course when I paint it, it seals it as well. So there's actually that. And what I do as well, and this is something I've started doing over the last few years, all of this has kind of evolved. Mary, you kind of on the ground floor of all of this that I've been doing, and this has evolved, I think you'd say. But what I do too, to attach it, I use a pneumatic nailer, and I actually shoot an 18 gauge brad nail into that, and that keeps it on the board. It's not going to go anywhere at that point. I find everything, I find a lot of stuff that I use from estate sales. I even find it walking in the woods. This is some sort of moss that I found on a trail that I was walking on. I took it home, put polyurethane, soaked it, and it's hard as a rock now. And then I attached it with that nailer. So I try to use different things. I've probably got 60 pieces altogether at home. I go to festivals throughout the year, but no two are alike, and I want to make sure that when I create something, it's a little bit different from than one that I made last week. So anyway, I turn it over for questions if you have any questions about how and I want to say this, I don't really consider myself much of an artist. When I look at Neil's stuff, that's artist. That's being done by an artist. But I think I'm more of a crafter. I think there's some art to putting it all together, composing it, arranging it, where people say, hey, that looks good. So I get that, as far as being an artist, I think there's part of that, but mostly I think I'm crafty.
Do you have a favorite piece of the ones that you have here this evening?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a favorite piece of the ones that you have here this evening?
I guess the big one, I did this one for a friend of mine several years ago, and that's the reason it's not for sale. She would kill me, I guess. I would be dead if I didn't bring that one back to her. But yeah, I don't really have a favorite. I do like that one because I like the shadow box. I like that concept a little bit. I've used it in several of them. The one that went on the far right, that one, that is from a longleaf pine, and that pine cone is probably that tall. And I actually got about 4 pieces off of that. Because but that one, deserved its own space. I didn't really feel like putting anything with it because it deserved its own space. But it's like a shadow box as well. This is and all this is pallet wood. This is scrap plywood. This is pallet wood. This is like a 1x8, piece of barn wood. So I'm kind of a low budget operation, to be honest with you.
Where do you go to collect pine cones?
Well, I actually have 2 or 3 places that I go that always produce, I can always find good pine cones and they're all sturdy, they're all, you know, most of them anyway, are you know, the kind I'm looking for. Mostly, there's a place in Fayette that I go across from the medical center that, I don't know what kind of tree it is, I don't know what kind of pine cone it is, but anyway. But the little ones, these little pine cones are from, this is from a little spruce pine cones about that tall. One of the things I started doing a few years ago was, kind of doing, you know, the blending. I started with the darker color, add yellow, and then it makes that lighter, a little bit lighter there, and then strictly yellow in the middle, and it looks like kind of what is it, a zinnia? Is that, people have told me it looks like a zinnia, so. Anyway, I've started blending the colors a little bit. So, all of this is, it's been kind of an evolution, I guess you'd say.
So how did you, what made you decide to take this up as an art form? Like, were you just walking in the woods and you said, that looks like
That's
fun?
part of it, and I think, and I'll give credit to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because I think God has put things in my path through these last 7 or 8 years. Let me give you an example. I was somewhere up in Tennessee. I was visiting somebody up there, and I stopped at an estate sale. I saw a sign on the side of the road, and I had been paying like $6 for a small roll of this twisted paper. All this twisted paper. And I've been buying, you know, those things, like a small roll for like $7 or $8. And I was there, and I knew I needed to order some more of it. And I came across this, I don't know how you describe it. It's just this huge bale of the twisted paper that people use in ladderback chairs, you know, to build the bottom in a ladderback chair. There's like a lifetime of this right here. And I don't have to buy that stuff for $7 anymore. So I think he puts things in my path, you know. The doily, you know, I see that, and in an estate sale, and said, I wonder how that would look with some pine cones in it. So I'll give him credit, you know, so I think he put things in our path to, you know, kind of lead us the way he wants us to go.
So I'm curious about your distinction between arts and crafts, because, I mean, to me, this is art, so.
Well,
yeah.
I can do the art / craft. How about that? Because I, you know, like I said, you know, when I see Neil's work, that's what I think in terms of being an artist. But I mean, that's definitely an art, for sure. But anyway, I think there's some art to putting all of it together. You know, composing it, arranging it, or whatever. But I enjoy doing it. I'm retired, and you have to plug in something, you know, when you're retired.
Where'd you retire from?
Bevel State up in Fayette. I worked there for 35 years, yeah. So this is what I do now. And I've painted thousands of pine cones, I guess, over the I don't really know how many. But this past Kentuck festival was my best ever. I sold 35 pieces of art at Kentuck this past October. So I appreciate, you know, the opportunity to, you know, to be able to do it. And I appreciate Neil and Mary giving me a chance to do this.
And
You applied for the next Kentuck as well?
I'm looking forward to it.
That's good.
It's gonna take me all summer to get my inventory.
That's good.
Now, you paint them all by hand?
I do hand, all of them are hand painted. Like I said, I've probably done thousands, but it's, you know, like I said, I sit on my front porch and watch the world go by and paint pine cones.
What type of paint do you use?
I'm
What
sorry?
type of paint do you use?
It's you know, I've got about 15 or so partial cans of house paint, and I get those from estate sales. And I mix and match. I go crazy. I'm not sure that's a color that's in the nature, but you know, I've created that with the partial cans of paint that I buy. It's just latex house paint, basically. I use a ton of white because, you know, you're always mixing, you know, the darker colors with the white to kind of, you know, have different shades of a color. And so, when I use a lot of white paint, but I usually find what I need at estate sales. Now, I have bought some paint if you're looking for, you know, some good, you know, paint like that, and you need a lot of it, cause I can't go to, you know, what is it, craft store, what is the craft store there?
Hobby Lobby.
Yeah. So you know, these little bottles of paint, that wouldn't, I mean, it wouldn't last, you know, long at all.
Wouldn't be
But,
as sturdy either.
what is, it's here in Tuscaloosa, Habitat for
Habitat
Humanity.
Restore,
Oh,
Habitat,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a great place, they've got just a whole section of different paints, you can get a small can for like $2, and I think I got a couple of the gallon cans for like $5 or $7, something like that, it's crazy. So it's just latex house paint.
And how do you take apart the pine cones? Just take them apart by hand?
No, well, I use a pair of loppers. Now, if you had a bandsaw, I don't have a bandsaw, but if you, what I do is I put one leg of the loppers on the ground, and then I've got the other leg, and I stick my pine cone, and then you just lop it in two. And then I take a pair of wire clippers and just clip around, and that's how I make the middle, is just I clip around a couple of layers of scales. And that way, you know, you get down to the point where, you know, it looks like a flower. But yeah, I use loppers and wire clippers. Yeah, that's the thing. Those two things work best, you know, or at least I found that they work best. But try to, because some of these pine cones are pretty tough. You know, you have to kind of get with it. You know, get with it to be able to get them the way you want. Anyway, any other?
Have you ever toyed with making anything besides flowers out of pine cones?
Well, I know.
It's
I know
fine if the answer's no, but
several
I'm just
people
curious.
that use whole pine cones and make, you know, wreaths and that sort of thing, but I've never tried to do that. This is kind of where I wound up, and I.
Well, it's lovely work.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I wish you success at the upcoming festival. Get that inventory up for all.
Yeah, I've got some work to do. Like I said, I usually try to keep about 60 pieces. I've got something less than that right now, so I've got to work some.
Are you from Fayette?
I'm originally from Winfield, but I've been living in Berry, just up the road in Fayette County for 30 years, I guess.
There's so many creative people who are from that area.
What is in the water?
No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, there's several crafters. There's a guy that does a really good job on walking sticks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, goes out in the wood, finds some kind of wood he wants and trims it all down. So there's a lot of creative people that live in that area. But I guess they're everywhere.
You have to hook us up.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. A lot of them have come through Kentuck, that's right.